What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the Severe Preview Show. Paul Brown here, and I'm flying solo again this week. Bit of a scheduling issue. Ian O'Neill or Sean Sheehan couldn't be here. Next week is UFC 306 Fight Week. Hoping to get at least one of those guys, if not both of them, with me for the preview show for that one. But this week is just me, and we just have a small UFC Apex card that we're going to gloss over today. So, in a fight that I mentioned in last week's podcast, Gilbert Burns is going to be taking on Sean Brady in the main event. Outside of that, there are a kind of a handful of fights on the card that are worth checking out. So I'm going to take you through the card now and maybe just highlight the one or two that are worth maybe keeping an eye on going through the event that's taking place, as I said, in the Apex this weekend. So opening up the card, Nathan Fletcher's making his UFC debut. If you're a fan of Cage Warriors, you'll know who this guy is. Next gen fighter. He's pretty exciting. He's got submissions in his locker. Quite a few rear naked choke finishes. His last Cage Warriors fight against Dan Dice was an absolute cracker. He hit a beautiful triangle mid transition. He's just one of those guys that uses jiu-jitsu to great effect in mixed martial arts, which I love to see. You have to be aggressive if you're going to try and implement jiu-jitsu. He's fighting Ziggy Ramaska. I think this is the fight that was supposed to happen a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, and visa issues might have played a part in it being bumped back, but it looks like he's finally getting a shot. Nathan is coming off the back of an appearance on Tough this season. Now, I think he lost his only fight in the house, but I didn't actually watch any of it. I just watched clips of Omran Shaban and Paddy McCarty's fights, but Nathan certainly one to look out for, opening the card, I believe, this weekend. Above that, on the preliminary card, we've got fights between Andrei Petroski and Dylan Budka, Jacqueline Amorim, Vanessa Demopoulos, Gabriel Santos, a Chinese fighter called Yizha. There's a lot of fighters there with zero, or not zero, but very little UFC experience. So, they're sort of filling in the spaces and just taking fights off people's contracts, I believe, on the undercard of some of these Apex shows. Nothing there that we would be overly concerned with just yet, but we'll see how some of those fighters develop. There's an interesting flyweight fight on the preliminary card. Andre Lima and Felipe dos Santos. A couple of young Brazilians facing off each other in the flyweight division. Lima is 25 and Felipe dos Santos is 23. So promising prospects. Lima is 2-0 in the UFC. And he is the fighter that you might remember had his arm bitten by Igor Severino in March of this year. So he came in off a win in the Contender Series. He's now 2-0. He's picked up the victories over Severino. The fight was stopped due to the bite. And Mitch Raposo, a split decision at UFC 302. So he's had a couple of fights so far inside the octagon. He's now looking to go perfect 3-0. He's 9-0 overall. And looks a very promising young fighter. Felipe dos Santos, his opponent, even younger at 23 years of age. He's 8-1. He's 1-1 in the UFC. But his UFC debut, if you'll remember, was against Manel Kape. Now, he lost that by decision, but he surprised everybody with how good he looked against the vastly more experienced Kape. So that fight, certainly on the undercard, for me, is going to be one of the highlights, one of the fights to look out for. Another fight there, Isaac Delgarian and Brendan Marat. I think they've got 2 or 3 UFC fights between them, so not a lot of experience there. A light heavyweight bout between Ovens St. Peru and Ryan Spann. I think Ryan Spann is on a bit of a slide in his career. Let me just open up his Tapology here. 2 or 3 wins, 2 or 3 losses on the bounce. Yeah, no, it's 3 losses on the bounce. 2 of those have been finishes. Nikita Krylov, Anthony Smith, Bogdan Guskov. So his last win was almost 2 years ago against Dominic Reyes. He's in there against Owen St. Preux, who's coming off a victory. Who was that against again? Let me check. Kennedy Nchekuku, I think, is the correct pronunciation of that one. But he's 41 years old now, OSP. He's been trading wins and losses. I think 2016 was when he fought against John Jones for the title. So he is certainly on a downward trajectory in his career. But he's been there and done that in the light heavyweight division, and he's maybe got the opportunity here to kick Ryan Spann out of the promotion. I mean, if Spann was to hit a a fourth consecutive defeat in that light heavyweight division, it might be the end of him. Up above that, then on the card, as we go further in, we've got another Chinese fighter, Rong Zhu, who's had a couple of UFC fights so far. Chris Padilla, I think, has only had one, so not a depth of experience there. Trevor Peake and Yanal Ajmuz is also on the preliminary card. It might be open in the main card, actually, this one. But Yanal Ajmuz is an interesting fighter to watch. Let me just pull up his record here. He's had some fights with some really good guys. Yeah, he's got a win over Sam Patterson. You'll remember he was the guy who beat Kiefer Crosby recently. So he is, if you can beat Sam Patterson, you've got something about you. And he's been in there with some good guys throughout his career. He fought in the PFL Challenger Series. He had a one-off appearance there before signing with the UFC, and he lost his last fight to Chris Duncan just last month. So a busy fighter, yeah, and he's certainly one to keep an eye on this card. So they're in a nice slot there, opening up the main card as well. Flyweight fight up next between Cody Durden and Matt Schnell. I want to say Matt Schnell is in a similar position to Ryan Spann. I think he's lost a few of late, hasn't he? Let's have a look here. Yes, 3 of his last 4. Brandon Royval, Mateus Nicolau, and Steve Erceg. Of course, that knockout by Steve Erceg early in the year that got Erceg the title shot. So he is definitely, like Ryan Spann, he is going to need a miracle. He's going to need to pull one out of the bag here, or he could be joining Spann in the Dole queue next week. And his opponent here, Cody Durden, a couple of defeats on the bounce as well. Tagir Ulanbekov in December of last year, and then Bruno Silva just last month, finished by Bruno Silva in the second round, and he's back out already. It's kind of a quick turnaround for him. So, yeah, both of those fighters kind of skating on thin ice in the UFC's flyweight division. Will give Graham the chance to sing his Matt Schnell song if he does get that victory this weekend, though. So just stay tuned. If Matt Schnell gets the hand raised, stay tuned for the Severe MMA podcast on Sunday. Moving into the top 3 fights on the main card, this is where things get interesting for me now. I'm going to look a little bit more in depth on these ones. Kyle Nelson is fighting Steve Garcia. This is a featherweight fight between 2 of the tallest weatherweights you'll ever see. Both guys are kind of in and around the 6-foot mark. Kyle Nelson fights out of the orthodox stance, Garcia out of the southpaw. But both of them are interesting in that neither of them likes to take a backward step. They're very, very aggressive. Nelson fights crazy. He fights with these wild looping overhands, hooks, massive shots. Who was it he finished? Let me just pull up his record here. He pulled off a stoppage victory in his last one. Yeah, Bill Algeo, and it was 4 minutes into the opening round. He cracked him and he put him on wobbly legs, and then he spent the next 30 seconds just chasing him around the cage and just slinging bombs. You need to go back and watch the finish. It's pretty insane. I don't think he even put him down. I think the ref just stepped in and stopped it while Algeo was still on his feet because he'd had enough. And it was a really exciting opening round to that one. So he's certainly one to watch. He's been in there with the likes of Joy Herbert and Billy Quarantillo before as well, but he's on a 3-fight win streak, and he's in there with Steve Garcia. Now, Garcia is also on a bit of a win streak, I believe. Where's he? Yeah, here we are. So yeah, 4-fight win streak and 4 finishes. If you go back and watch his last one against Song Woo Choi, that's just it's him all over. You get to see him just throwing caution to the wind and just blitzing forward, and it just becomes too much for Woo Choi, and eventually he just gets him floored and finishes him with some ground and pound. So both of those guys are going to step in there. I cannot see either of them wanting to take a backward step. So that's a very, very exciting matchup. I don't think either of them are ever going to trouble the title picture, maybe not even the rankings in that featherweight division. But they're going to be guys that are going to be putting on some chaotic, exciting fights against those sort of mid-tier fellas at 145. Big co-main event then in the women's flyweight division. Jessica Andrade steps in against Natalia Silva. 2 very contrasting styles here. Jessica Andrade, of course, has been the strawweight champion. She's been around the block over the last few years, coming off the back of a couple of wins, I believe, as of late. But she's She's just such a short, stocky fighter. And even now that she's moved up a weight class, she's not draining herself. So she can use that physical strength more, but she can't do things like fight behind her jab or, play around with teeps and leg kicks. She has to just smother the space and try and stuff everything that you're trying to throw. And a good example was her last fight. Who was it against again? Yeah, Marina Rodriguez, who's a tall, rangy fighter, similar to Natalia Silva, who is fighting this weekend against Jessica Andrade. Now, Silva is much, much faster than Marina Rodriguez was. But what Marina Rodriguez was failing to do was she was failing to give Andrade anything to worry about on the entry. So Andrade would enter into the space and she was allowed to just bully her opponent. I don't think Silva's going to let her away with that. Silva, as I mentioned, is ferociously strong. She comes from a sort of a taekwondo background, I believe, but her striking, her hands, her kicks, everything. She's just lightning fast and she has serious power. And things like her check hook are going to be a real, real problem, I think, or could be for Jessica Andrade. That'll be a weapon that she'll be looking to use, and she'll need to be precise with it because Andrade does try to bully her opponents. Natalia Silva has had some really, really impressive victories so far in her MMA career. What was her record now? I can't find her record there at the moment. 17-5. Yeah, so she's quite a lot of fights under the belt, but she's on a or she's on quite a long winning streak actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 fight winning streak. Couple of fights back, she finished, who was it? Victoria Leonardo early on, first round finish. And it was really, really impressive. There were some real nice moments in that right before the finish, about 10 seconds beforehand. She catches her with this beautiful, sharp check left hook. And as I mentioned, that could be a real useful weapon against Andrade. And then in her last fight, she fought Vivian Araujo. And now the step up in the rankings, I think, made her look a little tentative or nervous in the opening round, but she really came into her own as that fight went on. And some of the weapons I saw on display in that, I mean, the lead leg switch kick to the head, beautifully sharp, and against a shorter opponent now like Jessica Andrade, that again, that could be a weapon that plays a big part in this fight. So she's really promising here. If she's in a similar position to Sean Brady here, if she can get past this hurdle and get the name of a former UFC champion on her resume, it's really going to propel her up the division, up the rankings. And if she was to finish her, yeah, we could be off to the races with a new challenger in that flyweight division. And then we move on to the main event. So Gilbert Burns is fighting Sean Brady, and again 6v8 in the rankings, this time in the men's welterweight division. Now this is a big test for Sean Brady, this one. Gilbert Burns, as I mentioned in last week's video, he's on the downward trajectory in his career. He's he hasn't really picked up any top level wins over the last couple of years. I mean, that last fight he had great moments against Jack Della Maddalena earlier this year, but he looked like he just took a little breather at a certain point in the third round, allowed Jack Della Maddalena to create a scramble. And that, from that scramble, Della Maddalena landed the knee as Burns was getting back to his feet. So it's the athleticism of Sean Brady could again prove a problem. Can Gilbert Burns hang with him for, this one's probably 5 rounds. It is 5 rounds. I just see Sean Brady's physicality and his youthful exuberance maybe proving too much. He's had one slip up over his record recently. Now, he hasn't picked up a win over a high ranking middleweight. I think Michael Chiesa was the highest ranking one he's beaten. And then he lost that match, that fight to Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad's champion, and all respect to him and all that. But if you're getting outstruck and finished on the feet by Belal Muhammad, that's not a great look because Belal Muhammad doesn't really finish anybody really. So Sean Brady needs to put up a great performance here. He could bounce back with a really good performance against Kelvin Gastelum, and he dominated him in the grappling. I think he can do the same to Burns. Burns has amazing jiu-jitsu, but this is MMA, and I think the physical overpowering that Brady will bring, I think, might prove too much for Gilbert Burns, but we'll wait and see. It's a cracking matchup, and Brady just has to get past this. If he falls at this hurdle, I think you can probably write him off for the next couple of years as a title challenger material. The top of that division is 2-2 stacked with the likes of Della Maddalena, Ian Gary, and Shavkat and Leon Edwards all ahead of him as challengers. Brady has to get this victory this weekend. That's all for today. I told you it was going to be a quick one. Hopefully, didn't keep you or didn't keep get you too bored along the way. And as I said, it's a decent card for Apex. I mean, sometimes you get these Apex cards and there's nothing writing on anything, and it really can be a bit of a struggle trying to dress it up. But this one, there's certainly fights to look out for. That Steve Garcia, Kyle Nelson one, we'd expect fireworks there. A couple of the flyweight fights, there's some real jeopardy in play at those. And that co-main and the main, they play a big part in how the rankings are going to look going forward. So yeah, that'll do us. That'll do us for today. We'll next week we'll get a big preview in. I promise you guys. We'll try and get a couple of us together to preview UFC 306. I think that's the Noche card, isn't it? So yeah, exciting times ahead. Looking forward to that one. Enjoy the fights this weekend, guys. I'll see you next time.